Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Amplify workshop. We had one yesterday, so we had two back to back. So we are on a roll, and I'm very excited about today's workshop that we're going to be having with Shahala. We're talking all things UX for startups today. Shahala has 13 years of experience helping startups, investors communicate with their audiences, and she's going to tell you a lot more about that as we go through the next hour. But Shala, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited and honored to be here today. Thank you so much.
We are so happy to have you. You are a wealth of knowledge. I know this personally. Lots of founders have worked with Shala and have the most positive experiences, beautiful brands birthed out of the work that she's done, pitch decks, and all of the things. So I'm really excited to dive into what you're going to be teaching us and leaving us with today. I don't want to take up too much of your time so that you have all the time in the world to drop all the gems for us. To everyone watching, if you have questions along the way, make sure that you put them in the comments and we'll be able to answer some of those at the end. And with that being said, I'm going to bid you all farewell until the end of the workshop, and I'll join you back and we will go ahead and get started.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Kiana, thank you so much for that wonderful intro. I'm gonna try to uh, do this here. One second. I'm new to StreamYard, so hopefully I'm doing this okay. Like Kiana said, my name is Shala Madavi. I am the founder of Studio Mod. I have been in the space for aging myself a little over 13 years now. Primarily, I've been focused in the digital space. I have shipped over two, I lost count. So I just put it at about 200 websites and digital products in my time. I have executed over 60 brand identities. I've been doing a ton of pitch decks. I've got about 35 or so of those under my belt. That's for both VCs and startups. I have been very privileged in my career to work as a graphic designer, a digital designer, a front-end developer, a creative leader, strategist, and now I have stumbled into being an entrepreneur with my own business. Um, Today we're going to be talking about UX and why it's important for founders to think about. A lot of times we have founders, or I'll work with founders that are they're either like a technical founder or they are a knowledge like a knowledge leader, so like maybe a lawyer who wants to create a product for other lawyers. And so a lot of times they have great ideas, but they're not necessarily thinking about the UX, the experience of the product that they're making. And a lot of times people think about UX only in terms of the digital space. However, UX is something that like it really impacts us on the day-to-day basis. So for example, as an Apple user, this drives me insane. This way to charge your mouse. Doors can be very frustrating. Elevators, parking signs. This is very dangerous. This is an adorable mug, but not a great user experience. So UX is something that we experience every day in our lives, whether we're interacting with software or not. Um, so I like to say UX is really well, UX, it stands for user experience, and that's really the foundation. Like that's the base for building your product's interface. It really should be the base of anything that you're doing that you're going to be setting out moving forward with on your business. Good UX makes a product that's easy. It should be accessible and enjoyable to use, like a delightful experience. This is an example of poor UX. As a freelancer, I had to go and sign up for my own health insurance. I was just disgusted when I went to. I hope nobody who's listening worked on this site, so apologies in advance if you did. But this site is a poor user experience, especially when you're looking for something like healthcare, something where you're already a little bit stressed out. You don't really know what you're doing. You don't want to have to seek and find. When I go to the Connect site, you'll see that there's really no navigation. I've got just a bunch of things kind of screaming at me. Everything is like vying for my attention. And then, oh, by the way, cookie policy. So not only that, but if you were to zoom out and take a look at it, basically I have to go through 1, 2, 3. This is like a very long section, but 3 total sections before I even get to anything with that's actionable. And even then, the actionable items are not clear and they are put forth in a confusing manner. So this is an example of really poor UX. The other thing that is really important to remember, because we're looking at something very visual, is that UX is not the same as UI. One way of kind of thinking about UX is I like to use the house analogy. So a house is like the UX of your house would be like basically your the structure, the foundation, but it would also include things like the electricity and the plumbing and what makes it functional, like what makes it a functional place to live. And then the UI of your house would be like that's your interior design. So what makes it feel like a home? What makes it uniquely yours? Um, it is no secret that good UX is good for business, and this is kind of a non-negotiable. I think that there's been a lot of data out there recently, a lot of studies being done about how design and design-focused startups tend to see a better ROI. Today, customers manage 85% of their relationships without interacting with a human. This is a report from Gartner. I do not see that number getting smaller as AI continues to evolve and software continues to eat our world, as they say at A16Z. Um, One thing that I think is really important and something to be mindful of when you're thinking about investing in UX and why you should invest in UX, every $1 that's invested in UX brings $100 back in return. That's almost a 10,000% return on your investment. So why is that? Number one, you're going to increase customer satisfaction. So if customers happy, they're going to want to come back. You're also going to increase conversion rates. If you have a good UX and you have a delightful experience, you're going to easily be able to get folks where they need to go and or where you would like for them to go in order to buy that item or request a sales demo, whatever that might be. You're also going to lower your support costs by having invested time in UX. You're thinking about all of the things that users would be doing that might make them want to call like a help desk or reach out for support. By implementing good UX, you're reducing costs there. And kind of on the same side of the coin there, you're also reducing development waste. This is really true, especially when you have technical founders who oftentimes will just like jump right into building the product because they can and they're excited and they want to and they're really into doing that. And even if you don't have a developer or you're not a technical founder, if you're going straight into development without having done any kind of UX or foundational research, you're basically like gambling all of that and you're wasting money because you don't really know exactly what you're building and who you're building it for. Good UX can also increase customer loyalty and retention. So if you have a good experience, like I said, they're going to keep coming back and they're probably going to tell other folks about it. It's going to improve usability or ease of use of your product. So it's going to make you look good. You've been thoughtful. You're an empathetic product. You're an empathetic brand. And it will help you reduce the risk of building the wrong product. So kind of going back to that, getting a developer to code something before you've done any research, you could be building something that's entirely wrong. Like in your mind, it may be fantastic, but when the user gets it, they may not see a good use case for it, and that's because you really only vetted it with yourself and potentially your co-founder. I love this stat from McKinsey. Companies that excel at design grow revenues and shareholder returns at nearly twice the rate of their industry peers. So design is not really something that should be optional or considered fluff at this point. It is critical to your business's success. A good use case of this was Airbnb. So Airbnb they were plummeting, like they were going to fail, and they decided that they were going to pivot from from just focusing on churning out features to actually listening to their users, talking to their customers, defining what success looked like by mitigating specific pain points that kept reoccurring. They were able to go from a failing company to getting a $10 billion valuation. And they were also really, really big on creating user-centric cultures within user-centric culture within their company. So create a user-centric culture. So this is very, very important. So why would you want to create a user-centric culture? Well, I like this example a lot. So like maybe you're a founder, maybe you're a lawyer and you're like, I know exactly what I'm building. In this case, I'm using stairs because this is something everybody can relate to. You have some stairs. Here's something that everybody's going to be able to like know what these are and you're just going to walk up them. But what happens is you will find that users will do the most random things and they're going to be coming at your product from completely different mindsets, like things you may not have ever thought of. So it's really important to keep the users as the central focal point of your company and your product while you're building, because this is not what you do with stairs. Well, I mean, I guess you can, but you shouldn't. So user-centered design, as the name aptly suggests, it puts the user's needs in front and center in terms of your business. One thing that's really great about it is that you're involving end users, like the people who are going to be using your product very, very early on in the design process. And that will allow you to start before you ever get into code, before you even get into a high fidelity design. You can start collecting, analyzing, and incorporating that user feedback very early on. So it's an investment that you'll start seeing immediately paying off. It's also really fantastic to think about how to contextualize what your users' pain points are along with your business goals. So by thinking about users very, very early on in the stages, you are able to kind of make sure that your goals and your customers' goals are aligned so that you can grow nicely together. You're also going to be able to establish an iterative design process with UX improvement as its North Star. So this is, again, it's really positioning you as a customer first company. You are empathetic, you want to help people, and you want to make sure that your company is showcasing the empathy and the care that you've put into to building your product. This is, I think, wonderful to think about. A user-centric mentality is something that can be learned. You can't purchase it. It's not something you can just like go and buy off the shelf or like necessarily even get coached into doing. It's something that you can learn on your own and you can really put into practice. And this can have a tremendous effect as it ripples down from the top inside of your company. I think that also sometimes when you have a company and you're working with folks all day long, a lot of times, people can feel like, oh, I'm just at my job, I'm just doing my job. If you create this user-centric sort of culture, you are helping not just your users, but also your team understand that what you're building for has a greater purpose. It's not necessarily, yes, we live in a capitalist country, we're all here to make money, but can we do that with intentionality and can we do that with empathy? And I think that that's helpful for employees to say, hey, I'm not just going to make this person more money or make myself money. I'm actually going to work with a purpose and an intention every day of creating something that's great. So while today we're not necessarily be getting into like all of the principles and heuristics and all of that about UX, because that would take probably weeks to go through, I do want to make sure that I'm giving you guys some good foundational knowledge about UX and how we can be applying UX principles to solve business challenges. So user testing and research. So again, this is all parlaying back to that user-centric kind of culture that we were talking about. Know that the definition of your users will continue to change. Some of you may be more seasoned founders and you've experienced this on your own, that like as you are continuing to grow your business, you're seeing different user sets come up or different pain points that you can address via your product. So those users are going to change. So starting out by having a really narrow definition of users is okay. You just want to make sure that you are listening to those users actively. So listen to them. Don't, a lot of times people will want to like kind of shepherd people into an answer, or they'll like feed people tidbits to kind of produce an answer, or they're just waiting for their turn to talk. They're not actively listening. It's really important to actively listen to your users to develop that empathy that you can then parlay into your product. And then to kind of grow out that base, you want to be sure you're asking, ask your users, hey, who should I talk to next? Perhaps they touched on a topic that they may not be a subject matter expert on, but they know someone who is, and you are thinking, hey, this could really be beneficial, or I think that this person could have a lot to say or contribute to the design and the development and crafting of my brand and product. So who is it that I should talk to? Um, and this one is kind of a hard one. Ask questions that will hurt your feelings. This is your baby. You have put your time, money, blood, sweat, tears, all of this into it. And no one likes to hear that they have an ugly baby. But sometimes it's really important to be subjective in that, and being able to take a step back and ask questions that may be a little bit hard, or be open to listening to answers that may be a little bit hard to internalize. But it is very important to be subjective, because in the end, you're building this for your users, for an end goal, and not for yourself. So you have to remember, you're not your users. Your co-founder is not your users. There's a wide variety of folks that are using your product. And so sometimes that means that we have to put ego aside a little bit. And then lastly, I love this one, listen until you can accurately predict what you'll hear. So I would say, keep doing this until you kind of, what the pros and cons are. You're addressing the cons, and you can kind of already know what this person is going to be saying about how they're interacting with their product. That means you've created patterns that you understand, and you can then amplify or mitigate. Accessibility. So this is something that is super, super critical, that I think that a lot of founders, you wear a lot of hats. So it's not necessarily at the forefront of your mind. I think that accessibility is critical. It's super important. You want to make sure that you are implementing a universal design to offer inclusive experience. So what does that mean? Universal design could mean there's a lot that goes into it, but at its heart, it's basically making sure that your product or what it is that you're producing is equitable. So is it something that can be used by a wide audience without barrier? And then kind of along that same vein, you want to make sure that you are meeting compliancy standards. A good example, if we go back to the stairs, is if you're creating stairs, how will someone with a wheelchair be able to use your product? Or if you're thinking about software design, or a product application, is there going to be color contrast, so people with vision impairments will be able to read the text or see what's happening? And along that same lines, you want to consider assistive technologies. So folks with vision impairment, for example, will oftentimes be using a screen reader. And so you want to make sure that text is legible, that you have alt text for your images, so that folks can understand what is happening if you're trying to relay information via pictures. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you are encouraging continuous education and advocacy. That would be for yourself and for your team. These rules are constantly changing. They're constantly evolving. New technology is always coming out. So accessibility is something that it's never going to be a one and done. You should always be encouraging yourself and your team to seek out more information and make sure that your product is empathetic and accessible for a wide variety of people. You want to be consistent, be predictable, and be on brand. So humans love patterns. We are pattern seekers by nature. We love to find patterns, taxonomies, all of that. So there's a reason that Google has pumped billions of dollars into creating Google Material Design. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard about Twitter Bootstrap. There's a reason that these things exist, and that's because they are relying upon familiar patterns that users use to interact with products and applications. You don't need to necessarily create the screw to build the house, right? Keep it simple, keep it agile, and keep it iterative. So again, iteration is going to be absolutely critical when it comes to UX, and UX basically infers that you are constantly iterating, you're constantly refining. And so for that reason, you want to make sure that you're keeping it agile. So making sure that you will be able to pivot, and your company will be able to pivot to match user needs and address pain points as they arrive. Consider UX as an extension of your brand. So thinking about UX at its core being an experience, what do you want your brand to feel like? Like, what is that experience like? If you think about, it can be anything from how a website moves, how your product scrolls. If you think about the Netflix that their audio signature, I believe is what that's called. There are lots of different little ways that your brand can be experienced. So something to think about is how does all of that relate to your brand as a whole? And lastly, you want to make sure that you're choosing function over fashion. If you think about, like, I was on a website not too long ago, it was like a restaurant, and they had all these like fancy loading animations, all of these graphics, and it was beautiful to look at, but all I really wanted was the menu. I don't want to have to sit there and wait for 45 seconds for something to load and then find the menu, right? So, like, there is a reason that websites that are ugly, like Craigslist, for example, has been around forever. It's not beautiful. As a designer at heart, I love beautiful things, but I also know that if it's beautiful and it doesn't work, then it doesn't really mean anything at all. So I think that with UX, you're really putting function over fashion. It's super important. So stop, collaborate, and listen. So one thing that you don't want to do, you want to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for a ridiculously long runway. Your investors will love to hear that as well. You don't want to start out with a feature list that's going to create a very long runway or increase technical debt. You really want to kind of like whittle things down to an MVP. And then from that, I highly encourage prototyping before you code. And you can even do this, doesn't even have to be in a beautiful high fidelity mock-up. This can be in basic, like low fidelity wireframes where you are just testing out user flows. You can even get that in front of folks and get some feedback. And maybe in those very, very early stages, getting feedback and addressing, reassessing, redefining all of that before it ever touches code. So you're saving some money by not shipping it to a developer right away. And then it also allows for you to address user needs before rolling out new features. So if we go back to, this guy up here, and you're thinking about sort of your pie in the sky product that you want, perhaps there have been a number of pain points that have been addressed, and you're finding a pattern there. You need to be able to pivot and address those user needs before rolling out new features that you and your company thinks are cool. Kind of like the don't get your feelings hurt kind of things. Be open to fresh perspectives that can emerge from collaboration and testing. And I would advocate to say that this can come from inside your own team. So what people are saying inside your company, they all have their own ideas, and they may have some fantastic ideas, as well as obviously what we've been talking about, your users, and creating that user-centric culture. So making sure that you are open to fresh perspectives. And sometimes this comes internally from collaboration and testing. That said, be mindful of and avoid cognitive bias. So you could be, like, you want to stay true and to your fundamentals and your foundation, but cognitive bias is a real thing. There are lots of ways that people have cognitive bias, and it could be something as simple as like, I just had a bad day and I hate the color orange, and so this just made me really angry for no reason. So from that perspective, you're not going to pivot everything just because of one singular cognitive bias, one person's cognitive bias. So something to be mindful of to try to avoid. So how can we put UX metrics in terms of business success? So I would venture to say that the UX and entrepreneurial mindsets are essentially two sides of the same coin. The UX development system as well as a business development system are pretty similar. There's a discovery phase. There's an ideation phase where you are coming up with the idea to solve the problem that you saw in the discovery. There's a design phase. Obviously, with UX, you are actually designing things. With a business, you're designing your business, like writing your business plan. Who do you want to have on your team? And then you're validating all of it. And then this is kind of like a cycle that just continues on and on. So this will happen in UX, and it also will happen in business. So I don't think that they're extremely different mentalities. So I think you're already there. So some experience metrics to consider that will directly impact business metrics. Usability. So how easy is the product to use? Are people engaged with it? Are they interacting? Are they just leaving right away? Are they satisfied? Again, this comes from listening to your users, being able to iterate and improve your product based on feedback. And conversions. So are people buying what it is that you need them to buy? Are they downloading that media kit that you wanted them to download? Are they registering for that event? Like how are are they interacting with your product in the way that you want? And then that can also that also correlates to business metrics. So if your experience metrics are on point, then business metrics, you're going to see increased revenue. So repeat purchases, recommendations. It's like if you have a great experience at a restaurant, you're going to let people know. You're going to want to keep going back there. Reducing cost. So we talked about this previously. So you're going to be reducing costs in terms of dev waste and dev churn, customer acquisition, because you're getting a lot of word of mouth referrals. And again, your support team, because you're going to be making sure that your product is well thought out and can support itself. Improve loyalty, so increasing retention, decrease churn from your customers, because you're listening to them. They feel valued. They feel like you want them to be there, and you are actively listening to them, and everyone wants to feel heard. And you're also increasing your brand reputation, which can only benefit your entire company in the long run. So one thing I love this graphic. One thing to remember is that research is always going to be more valuable than opinions. It's always going to be more valuable than opinions. Everyone's going to have opinions. Everyone's going to want to have a say in what they think the best thing to do, or what they think the next rollout should be, or we need to add this, we need to add that. And a lot of times stakeholder ideas, if you're just thinking about it that way, this is what you end up with, when really all a user needs is something as simple as this. I think businesses are managed by numbers, and numbers must manage UX. So, okay, I think at this point you guys get it. So if you are an early stage founder and you haven't necessarily been funded, but you truly understand, like, hey, this is important, and I can't do my business without having some sort of foundation in UX. But you look at a stat like this, where the average UX designer in the United States' salary is about $104,000 a year, which is not a ridiculous number. I mean, these are folks who have spent years, time, education, learning the software. They've spent a lot of time being good at their craft. But from a bootstrap founder's perspective, this is a lot of money, especially when you start thinking about things like insurance, benefits packages, all of that. So there are a few options besides hiring someone in-house, which I think a lot of founders don't need right out of the gate. Agencies can be very, very expensive. So we're going to go over a few options that may be a little bit more affordable for early stage founders. So DIY, a lot of times founders are very curious. They want to learn something, or they just don't have the cash at all to hire anybody out. So these are some tools that I think there are lots and lots of tools out there. I should say that, but these are a few that are pretty well known and can get you up and running. So Balsamiq, it's very fast. You can probably just hop right into it and start using it. It will allow you to create lo-fi wireframes. So that's not going to be like the most beautiful thing in the world, but it will at least get you, or allow you to start thinking through user flows, user journeys, putting yourself in your user's shoes, and getting that in front of people so that they can also vet it as well. FigJam and Figma. I'm sure a lot of you folks have heard of this. I am a huge Figma fangirl. I am an advocate for it. I think the beautiful thing about these two together is that it's part of one company. FigJam is a fantastic tool for creating low fidelity wireframes, ideation, brainstorming, has like a beautiful built-in whiteboard, and it's great for collaboration. And you can parlay that into Figma, which does have a little bit more of a learning curve, and that's where you might want to get a designer involved. But you can certainly start out with some of the basics in Figma, which also comes with FigJam. Envision is another tool that a lot of folks are familiar with. It's fantastic for prototyping. It also has a great whiteboarding feature. It's great for collaboration. And then Miro is another one that is fantastic for whiteboarding, collaboration, prototyping, brainstorming, all of that stuff. So these are just some tools that you can get for, most of these are pretty cheap, and they also have freemium plans. So you can get those up and running fairly quickly. The other option is to seek out a contractor. Generally, contractors are going to be more cost effective than an agency because they don't have the same overhead. A good contractor is an investment. I mean, that is just kind of a given, but as we've been discussing and learning, it's an investment that will ideally and most oftentimes result in a good return. You are also, by getting someone who's an experienced contractor who has a proven track record, you're going to be getting a higher quality of work in a fraction of the time of a junior designer. So I think contractors are a really kind of nice sort of happy medium. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind when sourcing contractors. The first thing that you want to do is make sure that you are clear and upfront about your budget and your timeline. This is critical for your success as well as the contractor's success. I also would encourage you to write a unique and thorough job description if you're going to be sourcing contractors. This is important because it forces you to do the homework, to think about like who it is that you really want to bring in, because this ultimately is a partnership. You guys are building this, making this baby together. So you want to make sure whoever you're entering this partnership with, you've been really thoughtful about it. And at the same time, a contractor, they're entering a partnership with you too. So they want to make sure that they feel comfortable in it and they're excited about it. So get them excited and invested in it as well. I know as a contractor, if I have a client that they are user-centric, they know what they want, and they understand the value of design, I am so excited to work with them. And oftentimes we can come up with some really cool ideas for their business and where to take it together. It's a really beautiful partnership when those things align. Make sure you hire someone with a proven track record. This should be a given, but with things out there now, like you've got Upwork and Fiverr, and I can't even think of all of the different ways that you can source contractors now. Like I said, it's an investment worth making to go with someone who you can trust, that has a proven track record, versus just outsourcing the build and the basis, the foundation of your product to someone who you may not know, nor do they even necessarily speak the same language literally as you. I would also suggest, this is nothing new, but ask colleagues and mentors for references. So, send them the job description that you've typed up, send them that and see if they know anybody who might fit the bill for it. There are also ways to find them online, obviously, but I think that sometimes the best ways to do it, to make sure that it's trusted and everyone feels good about it, is to ask someone you know. The other option is you can hire in-house, certainly not at that $104,000 salary. You can hire at a much lower salary rate, someone who's green, and then you can upskill from there. It's great because it kind of keeps UX practice in-house, and it can be super collaborative because you're working every day together. You can do sprint planning together. You can do feature updates together, all of that good stuff. You can also, you're setting them up for success. But that said, you need to make sure that you are prepared to set them up for success. If you're hiring someone who's green, they're going to need a lot of support. They're going to need additional training. And so you'll want to make sure that you're fostering an environment where, like, hey, we know you're green, we're new at this, we're all growing together, and we're going to make sure that you have all the resources in place to make this a successful venture for all parties involved. So the other thing to remember is investing in your team cultivates a desirable work culture. So if you have a company that encourages education and continuing to grow your skills and continuing to let your employees have a voice and grow with the company, who doesn't want to work in an environment like that? To help find some of these people, you might want to talk to educators, folks at local universities, community leaders, your mentors, and just remember, I think this is kind of interesting that even though it's an agency may have a longer track record and they may be able to produce higher statistics, all of that stuff. Hiring green can be an interesting investment because it's cheaper and it could potentially be more valuable in the long run because you guys are building this and you're learning together. So I will sum it up with one of my favorite quotes from a designer, Saul Bass. I love his work, where design is thinking made visual. And I think that really sums up the core of UX and the way that I like to approach design. Again, thinking about function, thinking about users, thinking about what like all of these different pieces, everything, and then of course the beautiful things that needs to be there as well. But design at its core is providing solutions, and so that's why I love this quote: design is thinking made visual. So thank you so much, and here's my name and my email. I'm sure Kiana will be able to help get you guys in contact with me if that's something you all would like to do later on. But that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I will make sure that in the follow up email to everyone viewing, as long as you registered, you will get ways to connect with Shala, as well as some other follow up things. But I wanted to take a few minutes to see if anyone had any questions, and then I have a few questions myself. So, my first question is, how important is the UX UI design when a founder is building their MVP, and what are some things that they should be thinking about that may be different than what they would think about once they're building out the actual product that will launch?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. I think that it's really important. I like to kind of think about almost like a quadrant of
Mhm.
like your kind of like nice to haves to must haves, and then like thinking about the timeline and the runway that it's going to take. So I almost start out with like kind of a quadrant, and it's a fun exercise to do collaboratively where you can put post-it notes or sticky notes together on a board and sort of map out where you want to go. And then from that, you can kind of establish what your MVP is and then start making a backlog. And then based off of that MVP, the features that you've decided are critical for that MVP, you can start designing around that. This is I'm a big believer in design systems. If you guys are not familiar in design systems, this is where that would really come into play because you can start setting up your design system from the get-go when you're building out that MVP. So you're already thinking about scalability in your planning as well as in your design.
Okay. Awesome. So that you don't have to go back and change anything, but you're just constantly adding on.
Constantly, exactly. It's not reinventing the wheel. I think someone told me one time because I was like, oh, I just love making buttons. Like it's just really cool to think about all the little micro interactions. And so I always want to make my own buttons, whether I'm designing them or coding them. And someone told me like, you don't need to build the screw to make the house. And I was like, oh, that's true. And especially when you are in a fast founder mindset and you've got to ship fast, you've got to ship early. Like you don't, even though you might enjoy making the screw, you don't always have time to do that. So I think that is something really important to remember.
Right. So my next question is thinking about like accessibility in a different matter of the word. When it comes to UX UI, what should people be thinking about when it comes to making sure that whatever it is that they are building is literally accessible? So making sure that like, what should we think about when we are thinking about building things in this tech space, from a UI UX perspective, if anything, when it comes to like the hearing impaired, visually impaired, making sure that our product is fit for everyone.
Yeah,
to utilize.
absolutely. I think accessibility is so critical, and it's something that's so easy to overlook, especially if you yourself have not experienced accessibility issues. It's easy to lose sight of that. So some of there are this, and these are rules that are changing all the time. So like I said, this is something you should always be wanting to like educate yourself on further, constantly be reading up on it, but there are definitely things to consider. So, for example, making sure that your contrast ratio on if we go back to buttons, making sure that that text is visible. That's really important. If you, for example, also the images, if you are putting a bunch of text inside of an image, and someone with vision impairments is relying on a screen reader to give them information from, say, your website, that whatever you put in that image is going to get lost if you don't take the time to put in the alt text for those images. So that's something that's also really important. And the other thing that I would say is like with accessibility and kind of going back to that sort of like universal design, and those and like user-centric design fundamentals, all of that, you also want to make sure that your product and what you're thinking about is accessible to a variety of people, excuse me, who may have had different backgrounds. So your users are not monolithic. You have people coming from all kinds of demographics, people coming from all kinds of backgrounds. So obviously you have a target audience, and you know what that target audience is, and you're hopefully building towards that. However, you don't know everything that has led them in their journey to get them to where they are. And so that's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about, but that's something that will certainly come out when you're doing your research. You want to make sure that you're addressing folks of all different types of backgrounds, to make sure that they're thought of, and they will appreciate that. For people with hearing impairments, there are haptics, there are other ways that you can create more visceral experiences for them. So it's just, and these again are things that are constantly evolving, changing. The WC3 consortium has tons of rules on color contrast to make sure that your colors are going to work. I feel like this is like a could be a very deep dive topic in and of itself, accessibility. But I think that it's something that's super important to showcase that user-centric empathy from the get-go.
Mhm. And so, since you mentioned alt text, are there any rules of thumb to creating like a effective, impactful alt text?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say be as descriptive as possible. So, if I've got this is not I'm not trying to market for Alani, but I'm addicted to these things. So it would be like Alani can, Alani mimosa flavored energy drink, white can with a teal background, oranges as decorations. So
Okay.
you want to make sure that you're describing the actual text. Now, if it's just something decorative, like it's just like a little quote, like a quote block, I'm sorry, like not a block, but like just a quote icon, or something that really isn't necessarily impactful, you can just write in decoration in your alt text. But in general, you want to make sure that you're giving everything a description and be as descriptive as possible. It feels like kind of a pain to do it up front, but once you get into it, you're going to start to feel weird when you don't do it. And when you think about all of the implications, even if it's not altruistic, you're going to get dinged from an SEO perspective. But I like to think about it from a little bit more of an empathetic perspective of like, making sure that people know, and I'm not gatekeeping any information from anybody intentionally or not.
Yeah. I mean, and yes, from an empathetic perspective, but also SEO is important to all of us. We want to be found. So
Exactly. Yeah.
if that's going to impact it positively or negatively, we want to know. Do we have any questions from the audience right now? We do not have any in our little queue, but I wanted to give the audience the opportunity to put some questions in the comments if they have any before we wrap up this conversation. So we'll give them a few seconds here to see if anything pops up. But in the meantime, Shala, thank you so, so much for joining us today. You are, like I said in the beginning, a wealth of knowledge, and I will make sure that everyone has your information to be able to connect with you
Thank you.
in the future if they'd like. Do you have anything that you would like to leave us with before we go?
Um, I guess the big takeaway I think would be like, just don't, it's so easy, I think, when you're a founder and you are like, you have to move fast. I think, what is it, Zuckerberg is like, move fast and break things, and this is like the mentality, like, this is what you feel like you have to do. But I think it's so important to make sure that when you're moving fast, you have set up a good foundation, and so that when you're moving fast, you're moving with intention, and you are able to learn when you break things, and how to pivot and address those things as you continue to grow. Um, there are so many things that I could talk about with you from UX, like from a design perspective and all of that. So please do, if you're interested in learning more, if there are resources that you guys are interested in, please do reach out to me. I'm super excited to be involved in the Amplify community. So whatever I can do to help out, please, I'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We did get one question
Oh,
here. It says, any advice for a non-technical founder?
yes. So the wonderful thing about the internet is that there are, I will say, I love the design world and the dev world too. Like, I was a self-taught developer. There are tons of resources. There are tons of communities out there, and people want to support you. So I would say, if you're a non-technical founder, there are lots of places you can go online for free. Like, you can do a ton of like basic research on YouTube. LinkedIn has a fantastic learning platform. There's Upskill, there's Khan Academy. There are lots of ways to sort of understand, if you really want to get into the details of beginning, even thinking through user journeys. There are great places online to get started on doing that. And I would say, don't let don't let like a lack of experience in tech scare you from trying to create a tech product. A lot of times you may have a better idea because you're not ingrained in it. You're coming at it from a completely different perspective, and that's what the tech world needs: more diversity, people of different thoughts from different backgrounds, bringing cool and new products and ideas to the table.
Hmm. Absolutely. And if there are people in your circle who are who do have that technical skill that you don't feel like you have, then seeing if they will advise you, because a lot of times
Yeah.
there are people in our circles who just want to see us win and they are willing to help just because of that, and advise us along the way. So I do encourage you to tap into your network. Um, we have another question here. Currently a software developer and want to get into UX. Any advice or resources to learn UX?
Yeah. So again, I would say, starting out online is just a really great way to kind of understand the fundamentals. There are tons. I mean, if the Amplify community wants, I could do like a much more like in-depth sort of like actual getting into the nitty-gritty of like heuristics and things like that. I would be happy to do that. But you're going to want to, at least you can start with basically taking a look online and reading some studies. There's tons and tons of research out there. There are tons of ways to kind of help you start thinking about a user's experience. And then I would also say, like, even though I'm always like, you are not your user, you are not your user, you are a user, right? So like, you have, we are not like, we don't, it's not that we don't use technology, we do. So think about things from your own life. Like, start paying attention when you're using applications, or even things like, like the elevator button. Start paying attention to things in your own life that could be improved upon, or things that, you're like, hey, this was a really delightful experience. I think excuse me, MailChimp did a fantastic job at creating like a delightful experience way back in the day, when sending out emails was just a complete pain. and they had all these little Easter eggs. So when you would complete a task, the little MailChimp guy would kind of come up and wave at you and say hi. And I think that was a fantastic way of making their brand feel fun and making something that felt like a chore engaging and delightful. So I would say, aside from like learning the basic, like the actual like educational part of it, bring in some of your own experience to that, because you are a user. So what are things that make you feel good when you're using a product, and what are things that make you feel bad, and try to keep those things in mind as well when you're starting out on that journey.
Mhm. There's also a great company that Amplify has had the pleasure of watching grow throughout the years called Black UX Labs here on LinkedIn and everywhere else, every other platform that they are on in their website. But it's a great community of UX designers, researchers, all things UX. So if you are interested, then they could be a great community to tap into, because you can also learn how to take the skills that you have as a software developer and transfer them into learning more about how to get into UX. So that could be a good resource as well.
Yeah, thank you. Amber is awesome. They are fantastic. I love their mission. Yeah.
Yeah, there's super, super cool group. Everybody there is a wealth of knowledge, and they'll definitely be able to push you in the right direction. Do we have any other questions before we leave? Okay, well, if we do, I'll stop myself. But once again, thank you, Shala. We really appreciate it. And hopefully, we can have more from you in the future. If you all, like Shala said, if you all are interested in other workshops to take deeper dives into UX for startups, let us know, either Shala or myself, and we're happy to put something together for you all. In the meantime, make sure that you're following Amplify Louisville here on all of our platforms. That is LinkedIn, that is Instagram, that is Twitter, and our website is amplifylouisville.com. So you can stay in the know for other workshops like these. If you're in the Louisville area and you're tuning in, we do have two really, really, really awesome in-person workshops happening next month, and they will be announced soon. So make sure that you are keeping your eye out for those and you join us for those. We're going to be talking all things raising capital, relationships, maintaining relationships with VCs, all of the things that you need to make sure you have the money to do the things that you're trying to do. So you don't want to miss that, because it's coming straight from the source. So that's one that you'll definitely want to join us on. Join the Amplified community so that we can all interact and stay in the know with what's going on with one another, but also utilize each other as a resource in the community. And with that being said, we are done here. This has been pleasant. If you want to refer back to this workshop at any time, or you would like to share it with someone in your network, it will be on our YouTube channel. So you can share it there and reference it there. And yeah, have a great rest of the week, everyone. Thank you so much, Shala. We appreciate you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.